The text says that when they attacked him, he saw the glory of God. And Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Deke, I got a problem. Because Paul told us in Romans chapter 8 and verse 34 that Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father, where he makes intercession on our behalf. And Steve said, "Thought, you're right." He said, whenever the enemy accuses us, because the devil is called the accuser of the brethren, Jesus is our divine defense attorney seated at the Father's right hand. Okay, let me see if I can put it in your lap. Sister Pam, I was sitting in my living room one day, and I got word that the devil brought some charges against me. And I was immediately summoned to the divine courtroom in glory. I stood there and I was wondering, because I examined the prosecution's table and the devil was sitting there with a stack of files. And when I peered into the files, it was all of the charges against me. And you know what I found when I looked through the files? Most of them was true. Deep saints show up on third Sunday. It's a whole stack of files. And I thumbed through them. And most of them had charges in it that were true. And I said, well, I see the judge, that's God. I see the prosecuting attorney, that's the devil. I saw myself, I'm the defendant. What I didn't see was a defense attorney. So I started searching the courtroom to see if anybody could come and stand on my behalf. Fellow started walking up. I asked him what his name was. He said, my name is David. I said, David, are you coming to represent me? He said, I'm going to try. I said, well, David, how will you know whether or not you'll be able to represent me? He said, well, if the devil doesn't have a file on me, then I can represent you. So when David stood, the prosecutor stood and said, Your Honor, I don't think we're going to be able to use David as Thorpe's defense, because if Thorpe got a stack this high, David got a stack this high. David walks out of the courtroom. In walks in another fella. I said to him, sir, what is your name? He said, my name is Peter. I said, what are you here for? He said, I've come to represent you. I said, well, how will you know if you'll be selected? He said, well, if the devil doesn't have a file on me, like the one that he has on you, then I'll be able to plead your case. Devil immediately stood and said, Your Honor, I object. I got a file on Peter. He'll lie, cuss, and cut. Don't think Peter will be able to stand. So there I was, standing in the courtroom. Judge is seated where he's supposed to be. Prosecutor is seated where he's supposed to be. And the prosecutor says, if he has no valid defense, the motion that I offer is that he immediately be turned over into my hands to perish for all of eternity. It is then that the judge said, before I pronounce sentence on Thorpe, is there anybody in here who can represent him? And I looked. And in through the back doors of the courtroom, I saw one with hair like lamb's wool, eyes like balls of fire, kneecaps like polished brass, King of Kings on one leg, Lord of Lords on the other leg. And he walked up and took me by the hand and said, Thorpe, don't worry about pleading your case. I'm here to represent you. And he said, don't worry about the devil having a file on me. He tried, but he couldn't make nothing stick. And don't worry how your case is going to turn out, because me and the judge get our mail at the same address. I and the Father are one and the same. So, Deacon Stephen, I got a problem with your text. Because you said when you died, Jesus stood. And he said, Thorpe, you're so intuitive. Thorpe, don't you remember when Moses was sent to Egypt? He told them about the God who sent him. And that God is not the I was. I'm about to get full of my own cooking. That God is the I am. So whatever you need him to be, if you need him as your defense attorney, he's seated at the Father's right hand. But when you die, he stands. You know what that tells me? My reward is rich. I have been in some preaching environments where I thought I was doing all right, but nobody stood. It is good for me to know that when I die, if I never get a standing ovation on this side, I got one waiting on me on the other side.